I'd like to be enlightened. Wouldn't you? It's such a nice idea. You'd be, just always have just the right thing to say and never get too stirred up about anything. And I don't know when I first got in my head this idea that this state of enlightenment existed, but ever since I heard about it, I wanted it. That probably doesn't help, right? One of the many, many ways that I know that I'm not is that I'm not an animal person. I don't particularly like animals. I know that there's something the matter with me about this. I'm sure I would be a better person if I liked animals, especially dogs. Especially in my wife's eyes. My wife is a dog person. We have a dog. My brother is also a dog person. And when I was first seeing my now wife and we were getting together, I was living with my brother and his dog, and all of a sudden there were all these dogs in my life, and so I've been watching dogs and watching myself watching dogs. And there's that moment when two dogs are watching each other. You've seen this moment, right? Where they're maybe their tails are wagging or maybe not, and it's a little scary, but they're still. They're like perfectly still, coiled and ready. And then something happens. And I don't know what it is, but it happens faster than I can even observe, and I can never tell which dog it is that starts it. But all of a sudden, from that pregnant stillness, there's motion, and they're playing or fighting or whatever happens next. And I wish I had that kind of aliveness. That kind of in-touchness, whatever it is in the dog that lets it react so seamlessly, so smoothly to whatever just happened, that micro-noticing. But humans, I think we are a little bit more complicated. We find ways to get in the way of ourselves, to get in the way of hearing our own deepest selves. Parker Palmer, who I'm going to talk quite a bit about today, who's a Quaker teacher and an important teacher to me, he describes our relationship with this development, this getting in the way of ourselves, with what he calls a Quaker PowerPoint, which is a strip of paper. He says that it's like this. We begin in a wholeness, where our outer life and our inner lives are one. And that's obvious to anybody who has ever looked at a newborn for just a moment. We begin in wholeness. But then something along the way lets us know that it's not particularly safe. And this sometimes for us happens at school, it sometimes happens at home, but something will tell every one of us that it's not always safe to have that inner life just freely flowing in the outer world. And so we begin to separate. We have one side of our paper, our being in the outer world, that side that's performative a little bit, that's paying attention to what other people think about us, that side that ends up having a lot of goals and purpose and wants to do something with the world. And then we have another side, a side that we keep sheltered, keep private from the world, the side of the inner life that has to do with dreams and feelings and those more tender, soft places in ourselves. So we begin to make that separation, put that barrier up, and then eventually, he says, we figure out that we don't love this divided life. We want that wholeness that we began with, and so we figure out how to bring our inner life to the center. And so our inner life now is what everything is orbiting around. We want our inner life to guide us. This is called being centered, he says. We orient around our inner life, but we still have this outer life that is separate. And as you can see, while there is a connection, there's still that sense of maybe a walled garden, a separate inner life that needs to be protected, cut off from the outer world. And so he says that maybe we develop far enough, long enough, that we learn another way, or we practice another way, which I know for all of the math teachers out there, you know is a Mobius strip. So Parker Palmer says this is really what's true, what's the case in kind of a adult wholeness. That we are watching now our inner life, what we believe to be our inner life, or what appears to be our inner life, until suddenly, as we trace our Mobius strip, we're noticing what is our outer life, or what appears to be our outer life. Okay, that's the end of the Quaker PowerPoint. Do you recognize yourself in that at all? This question, how do I relate to my inner life and my outer life? How are they connected? How do I move between them? And where is it safe to show what? Bill Plotkin is a psychologist who has a schema that includes the soul and the spirit, and that's bold and daring for a psychologist these days, even though, of course, that word, psychology, psyche, is the soul. That's the same word, different Roman and Latin, right? But, Greek and Latin. So the soul, Bill Plotkin says, is the opposite direction of spirit. Spirit is universal. It's the high that connects us all, that enlightenment idea. That soul, on the other hand, is individual and unique and downward and inward. And Plotkin's notion is that we have a lot of excitement in our culture and a lot of space in our religious ways for celebrating that sense of spirit, of up and universal, but we don't always get space for the soul. Space to connect with that which is down in us, unique and at the underlying of our being. And I know that I'm on shaky territory for some of you with this soul business, so I'm not claiming that it's something metaphysical or everlasting or anything like that. I'm trying to articulate something that I think is ultimately inarticulatable about what it is that lies at the center of our inner life, what it is that holds us throughout our lives, from the time we are born through when we die, and perhaps longer. So Bill Plotkin wonders, how do we encounter the soul? And while I think occasionally a particularly sagacious trickster, like an old man with a stone, a magic stone, might trick the soul into showing up, more of the time we have to have a certain amount of practice and space in order to listen for the shy soul. I I think that most of us in this room probably are lucky enough to have experienced places in our life that welcome emotions. We can talk about how we feel. Places that welcome the intellect, where we can talk about our ideas and what we're thinking about. Many of us are trained in practices of listening, particular kinds of listening, reflective listening, empathic listening, all sorts of ways of listening where we have a job to do with our listening. What's rarer is the places of deep listening. The places where there's no agenda but simply stillness. Places that become so still that the soul can speak. Like a wild animal, says Parker Palmer, the soul is tough, resilient, resourceful, savvy, and self-sufficient. It knows how to survive in hard places. He says, I learned about these qualities during my bouts with depression. In that deadly darkness, the faculties that I had always depended on collapsed. My intellect was useless, my emotions were dead, my will was impotent, my ego shattered. But from time to time, deep in the thickets of my inner wilderness, I could sense the presence of something that knew how to stay alive even when the rest of me wanted to die. That something was my tough and tenacious soul. I know Parker Palmer is not the only one who has found that soul, however tenderly, however threadbare, accompanying him through a bout of depression. I've been there, and I know many of you have as well. Depression is one of those opportunities for soul encounter, for finding ourselves face to face with that which holds when all else cannot. Plotkin has this idea that we all need these encounters with the soul, and maybe depression is that's one of the reasons why these periods of depression happen in us, because we're desperate. We need to be faced with our own soul. But he says there are other ways. There's these encounters that people have had for time immemorial. That's what rites of passage are all about. Go alone into the wilderness and stay there until you encounter your own soul. And through that, he says, through that encounter with the soul, our ego, our thinking self, learns its purpose, which is to serve the soul. That's Plotkin's map. I got to experience our Unitarian Universalist coming of age rituals, and on the last retreat, as we went through a year of connecting with each other and ourselves, our last retreat, we went out into the wilderness alone for a few hours during the day and then for 1 hour at night. I was 13 years old. I had never spent an hour alone at night, let alone in the wilderness of Lake Chabot campground, not. But I was scared, and I sat there under my tree in my spot, and to hold myself, to find myself encountering my soul in that moment, music sprang from me. I started to sing to myself. And it was a holy moment. Yet despite its toughness, Palmer says, the soul is shy. Just like a wild animal, it seeks safety in the dense underbrush, especially when other people are around. If we want to see a wild animal, the last thing we should do is go crashing through the woods. shouting for the creature to come out. But if we are willing to walk quietly in the woods and sit silently for an hour or two at the base of a tree, the creature we are waiting for may well emerge, and out of the corner of an eye we will catch a glimpse of the precious wildness we seek. Now, while I was catching my glimpse of precious wildness, I was terrifying my coming-of-age cohort who could hear faintly in the distance me singing, I'm sure, off-key in the wilderness. This is the paradox of spiritual journey. We are ultimately alone in our journey. There are places in the inner life that no one else will ever touch. And we are necessarily together. We can't not find those places, cannot hold them and touch them without the care and support of others. This is why small groups are such an important lifeblood of a religious community, of our religious community, these chalice circles or other small groups where we dwell together in enough stillness, enough silence that each of us can listen to our own inner teacher, can give voice, perhaps in a moment, a glimpse to that wild, shy soul. And it is true that journeying out into the wilderness is often an important part of this. I was on a backpacking trip with my best friend about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and my first time really backpacking. And we'd gone out into the Trinity Alps, and I was just alive that first morning with wonder at the wildness of it all. And in the quiet early morning, I found a doe approaching me, and we were gazing into each other's eyes when my friend bounded up the rocks, yelling about how great the coffee he had just made was and scaring my wild doe away. Unfortunately, Palmer says, unfortunately, community in our culture too often means a group of people who go crashing through the woods together, scaring the soul away. In spaces ranging from congregations to classrooms, we preach and teach, assess and argue, claim and proclaim, admonish and advise, and generally behave in ways that drive everything original and wild into hiding. Under these conditions, the intellect, emotion, will, and ego may emerge, but not the soul. We scare off all the soulful things, like respectful relationships, goodwill, and hope. He boils it down to really a simple set of rules for how to make space where the soul might show up and say something. He says, no fixing, no saving, no advising, no setting each other straight. That's all there is to it. But boy, if you want to sit down and try and practice that, you can notice how quick you want to fix and advise, or at least I do. Fix and advise and set each other straight, save each other. A minister I worked with once, when we would prepare people for these sorts of small groups, she'd tell a story about taking her class out to the wilderness to talk to birds. We put a little bird seed in their hands. So now the thing is, you have to be really still. They're wild animals, so you have to be still and quiet. And so she was demonstrating this. She put a little bird seed in her hand, and she lifted it out, and she was explaining how just still and quiet you need to be to these kids she was with when a bird landed right there on her hand. And it startled her so much, she screamed and jumped and flung out her hand. It's kind of like what's going to happen at the end of this service. I'm sorry. It is what happens, though. But luckily, we get chance after chance after chance. I'm working on this with Henry right now. It's been years I'm working on it, and I'm still working on it, not to invade his inner life. I want to hear him. I want to hear that soul of his speak to me. I want to know what he's thinking about, what's going on in there. And the more I ask, the less he wants to talk about it. It's not easy. But when we can, I was in a Soul Matters group once, a small group ministry with a man who was slowly walking out of a years-long depression. And he was recovering from alcoholism and from a painful divorce. And over a year of gathering together once a month, I began to notice his presence slowly shift, the heaviness in his shoulders lightening, a warm smile coming more quickly to his lips. He began to share about the fantasy novel he was writing, a story of flying ships based on bedtime stories he told his son. The soul already knows what medicine we need and is always ready to provide it if we can only be patient in our listening. It's what this first Sunday of Advent is all about. The hope is in the waiting. So a few ancient holy words. This is from the 130th Psalm. I wait for the holy. My whole being waits. My soul waits for the holy more than for those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. May we have the patience to wait, and may your soul greet you with just what you need. May it be so, and amen.